welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we will be going over the Chicago Bears and their 2020 fantasy football projections. So far, we've gone through the AFC North. We're going on through the NFC North. AFC East, after we're done with this, we're getting through every single NFL team before week one. So without further ado, your 2020 Chicago Bears fantasy football team preview. Starting off with the self-proclaimed number one QB room in the entire league. Of course, I'm talking about Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles. I think it's Foles' competition to lose. I mean, we've seen the guy be an above-average QB every single stop in his career when he's not being coached by Jeff Fisher or Doug Marrone. We'll see if Matt Nagy deserves to be in that conversation or not, but, you know, you go back and Foles was with Nagy and the Chiefs in 2016. I mean, the things Foles was doing well with the Eagles in terms of, you know, really orchestrating the offense through a heavy dose of RPOs. That's what the Bears are trying to do right now. I mean, really, Nagy, he's gotten criticism in his career for pretty much just taking that Kansas City offense and doing small things to evolve it over time, but, you know, more or less running that same system. So I think it just fits Foles better at this point, particularly if Trubisky's rushing ability just is going to continue to be ignored. Because, I mean, this was always what made him at least a decent NFL quarterback at one point. I mean, in 2018, it wasn't like Trubisky was just trash all season. They just made the playoffs in spite of him. It was definitely more to the defense. I'm not trying to stick up for that season too much. He was still a below-average passer in almost every category in 2018, but truly fell off a cliff in passing efficiency last season, 36 among 42 qualified passers and adjusted yards per attempt. And it's that rushing ability that just disappeared. I mean, he averaged 20 rushing yards per game in 2017, 30 rushing yards per game in 2018, and just 13 last season. So it all kind of started in 2018 when he did get that, I believe it was a shoulder injury in the second half of the season. Once he came back, I mean, it took him up until the Dallas game, you know, post-Thanksgiving in 2019 for us to see Trubisky, you know, really utilized on a heavy dose of read options again, and he can do it. It's the best part of his game. He's a good athlete. I mean, it's, you know, I've thrown around the Midwest Bortles comparison to him, and it's not necessarily an insult. Obviously, you want your franchise QB to amount to a little bit more than Mr. Bortles has done, but this is still a guy that used to have spike week potential and could run the ball. So unless we just see a huge return to form from Trubisky, and, you know, as we talk about the rest of this offense, I don't think there's a ton of reason to expect that to happen. This is just a quarterback room to fade in 2020 for fantasy purposes. Just don't get near it, everyone. I mean, the idea that Nagy is going to propel either QB to great heights, I just don't see it. There's no rushing floor for either dude, unfortunately, and the spike weeks in this offense, few and far between. So consider finding yourself a different quarterback. I doubt many were even considering targeting this Bears group to begin with. Moving on to the backfield, we have David Montgomery as a clear-cut RB1, Tarik Cohen as your change of pace, and Cordero Patterson, who, you know, if you didn't know, I am the longtime president of the Cordero Patterson fan club, the league's most efficient rusher ever. Minimum 100 carries and yards per carry. So love my guy CP. Wish he gets the ball more. I am done gushing over him for the remainder of this podcast. So David Montgomery, 267 touches last year, 12th most in the league. Yards after contact, not so great. Only 2.33 yards after contact per touch, right there. Peyton Barber and, you know, David Johnson's corpse from 2019, just not good. And after we saw what Montgomery did in college at Iowa State, and I mean, you guys all probably saw, you know, my lovely employer PFF's numbers about Montgomery just breaking the most tackles anyone had ever seen. Coming out, he was supposed to just be his day one stud. Wasn't what happened. And, you know, to not even be an RB2 when it was all said and done, incredibly disappointing for fantasy owners. He did get better as the season went on, though, and this was similar to Miles Sanders, where Montgomery, he only averaged over 4 yards per carry in 2 of, I believe, his first 12 games of the season. Managed to get it 4 of his last 5 going out. So, you know, it wasn't as kind of visible as Miles Sanders playing better at the end of the year because, you know, Eagles were in the playoffs and all that. But we did see Montgomery get better as the year went on. I'm not I'm not going back to the well too much, but we're now able to get Montgomery at his floor. Last year, it was costing us like a, RB pick in the teens to kind of get him. Now he's going outside of these top kind of 23, even 24 running backs. And I know that 250 touch threshold is a little bit arbitrary, but 144 of 153 running backs to get 250 touches since 2010, PPR, RB24 or better. It's just so much volume. It's almost impossible not to put up production. Eventually, if you've been doing best balls or mock drafts or anything like that, after those first 4 or 5 rounds are gone, you see very few, if any, RBs that you can, confidently project for 250 or more touches. Montgomery is kind of the cheapest, last, high volume back available on a lot of fantasy drafts. For those out there that, find yourselves getting some really true baller wide receivers early, don't be afraid to get Montgomery there because, again, after him, it's just rough. And this is the same, looking backfield as last year. I do think we're going to see Montgomery get the rock again, try to prove that 2019 was a fluke. And honestly, he deserves to maybe even get more of a 3-down role because Tarik Cohen last year was just brutal as both a rusher and receiver. 3.3 yards per carry, 4.4 yards per target. I mean, I can barely even begin to describe just how bad of a mark that is. I mean, literally the worst yards per target mark in PFF history. I had to go back to 2003 to get Hakeem Aziz. Excuse me butchering that name, but there's only one guy that was worse since the statistic began being tracked back in 1992. I mean, maybe they keep throwing the ball. Only McCaffrey, Kamara, James White joined Cohen with at least 200 receptions over the last 3 seasons among RBs. At some point, though, it's defenses seem to know what's coming when Tarik Cohen's on the field. So that's probably more of an indictment on Nagy than Tarik, considering, how many of his touches are these design looks. But if giving Montgomery even half of Tarik's pass down snaps would kind of help him get into a better flow with the offense, I think that's something the Bears should seriously consider. Moving on to the wide receiver room. Allen Robinson should be in any conversation among the best 5 to 6 top wide receivers in the entire league. I mean, the stuff he has had to deal with throughout his career is just criminal. Quarterbacks dating back to college. Christian Hackenberg, Matt McGloin, Blake Bortles, Chad Henne, Chase Daniel, and now Mitchell Trubisky. Nick Foles is objectively the best quarterback of A-Rob's career. I hope your ears are done bleeding from that previous list, but last season, Robinson managed to do just fine, even with Trubisky under center. I mean, 3rd most targets in the league. Only Cortland Sutton, Michael Thomas, and Stephon Diggs had a higher percentage of their team's air yards. I think the only more established wide receiver ones in the entire league than Allen Robinson are Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen, and Julio Jones. I am buying A-Rob in fantasy leagues of all shapes and sizes in 2020, regardless of who his quarterback winds up being. And the same, honestly, can be said for Anthony Miller. And, for those that don't know, the Bears' rising 3rd-year slot receiver. Guy scored 7 touchdowns while playing through a bum shoulder as a rookie, and then comes again last year. And once Taylor Gabriel went down, he was putting up blow-up performances. I mean, during weeks 11 through 15. It's a really specific stretch, and we can't just take a guy's best 5 weeks of his career and assume he's going to be, a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 because he was able to pull it off then. But it's still good to see these guys you want to break out, have past success of high-level play, and that's exactly what Tony Miller has had. And we're only 1 season removed from everyone freaking out all preseason about how D.D. Westbrook was his big value because of Nick Foles' historical slot usage. And who knows if that would have come to fruition. He got hurt. But now we're not even barely hearing that same narrative be used for Miller. And, again, the question with these receivers we always got to ask is, well, what happens if it's Trubisky? What happens if it's Foles? If it's Foles, okay, great. We're getting this, again, high slot usage history that we've seen dating back to his days with the Eagles. And if it's Trubisky, fine. In terms of adjusted yards per attempt, Miller has been Trubisky's most efficient receiver of his career. So I'm buying A-Rob and Miller, pretty much any league I can get my hands on them. Expect Ted Ginn to take that Taylor Gabriel field stretching role in 3 wide receiver sets. Cordero Patterson will be out there a little bit too. Riley Ridley, Javon Wims, other candidates to steal some snaps here or there. Now on the tight end room. I mean, oh boy, this is ridiculous, guys. We got 2nd round pick Cole Kmet, Jimmy Graham, Demetrius Harris from the Chiefs, Ben Broniker, J.P. Holtz, ex-2nd round pick Adam Shaheen, Jesper Horsted, Eric Saubert. It's absurd the amount of tight ends on this team. I just don't get it. It's a mess. Will Jimmy Graham just return to form? I don't think so. He looked pretty washed in 2018 to me. And, the list of free agent tight ends, doing much of anything is bad, particularly when they're paid big money. I'm not saying, the Graham contract is going to, the Graham no trade clause contract. It actually doesn't even qualify with some of these guys. I'm looking at free agent tight ends that have gotten $20 million contracts over the years. They're Coby Fleener, Trey Burton, Jimmy Graham with the Packers, Jesse James, Martellus Bennett, Ladarius Green. So, I'm citing an older contract for Jimmy, but again, he was washed in 2018 pretty much. He had that last season with the Seahawks where Russ was able to somehow get this guy all those red zone touchdowns. It just hasn't been good. Don't go the well here because we don't even know how long he's going to be on the field. Because, Cole Kmet, he's gotten some pretty great, pre-draft recs. Even some comps to, Rob Gronkowski, I believe I saw from Chris Sims with NBC Sports. So I'm not saying that. I don't think he's going to do anything as a rookie because we never see tight ends do anything as a rookie. The only top 12 PPR fantasy tight ends since 2010 as rookies have been Evan Ingram, and it took a OBJ injury where Beckham only played 4 games that season, and Rob Gronkowski, the best tight end we've ever seen pretty much, with all respect to Tony Gonzalez. So it's one of these situations where I don't think this offense really has much of a chance of enabling any of these tight ends because they're all going to be splitting reps, and we shouldn't expect much from A, a rookie, and B, washed up, seasoned vet like Jimmy Graham. So with that said, moving on to the rankings. You can find all my rankings throughout the season on PFF.com. Use code FANTASY40 to get 40% off my rankings and some other cool stuff on the site. I have Foles winning this job, but might not start 16 games. He's my QB 31 behind Jarrett Stidham, ahead of Tua. I can probably move Tua ahead of him. You're not drafting any quarterback ranked outside the top 30. Do not go out of your way. Don't go in your way, out of your way. Do not draft Foles in 2020. David Montgomery is my RB19. It's just that volume, everyone. I have him, ahead of Fournette, ahead of Gurley, ahead of Le'Veon Bell. I just think those touches are a little too much to ignore. I got him right behind Chris Carson, David Johnson, Melvin Gordon. Pretty much, I had David Montgomery as my highest kind of last remaining back that probably won't have a pass game role. Tariq, I have lower. I have Tariq at RB45. I am worried he eventually gets phased out of this offense. I might just be a little low on these pass catching backs in general. I have him one spot ahead of one spot behind James White, one spot ahead of Darrell Henderson. I guess the issue is we need Tariq to do what he's always done. He's not going to do more. It's not like if Montgomery got hurt that Tariq would all of a sudden be getting 12 plus carries per game. I just think there's a low ceiling and the floor is a little bit shakier than years past, just based on what we saw last season. Allen Robinson, my wide receiver 7. I have him behind Adam Thielen, ahead of Kenny Golladay. I just think it's a situation where, look, last year A-Rob was wide receiver 8 and things are better. He's now got Foles under center. Targets are going to be there. There's so few guys more ingrained as their team's number one pass game option. A-Rob, bye. Anthony Miller is my wide receiver 41. And, in that range, I have Darius Slayton at wide receiver 38, Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 39, Mecole Hardman, wide receiver 40, and then Miller right there at 41. He is in front of Deebo Samuel, Golden Tate, Preston Williams. I like Tony Miller a lot, guys, and I think this year a lot more people will know who he is after some solid performances. Jimmy Graham, tight end 30, one spot ahead of David Njoku, one spot behind Darren Fells. As I was saying with Foles, there's no reason to touch a quarterback or tight end with a ranking outside the top 30. So Bears win total 8.5. I think the NFC North is down as a whole if we haven't kind of gotten that impression from these last 3 team previews. With the Packers just likely kind of regressing back to more of the, middling roster that their efficiency said they were last year. Vikings, their defense could be down. And the Bears, they added they added Robert Quinn to replace Leonard Floyd. Maybe Roquan Smith really takes a step forward and that defense gets back to being elite. But I don't know. This offense is still very meh. If they would have done something personnel or coaching-wise to complement, bringing in Foles, maybe there'd be more reason for optimism. As it is, I think this team looks a lot like an 8-8 squad. Maybe they can get over. I wouldn't bet my life on this over-under, but if I had to take a side, I am taking under 8.5 wins. So this has been 2020 Chicago Bears Fantasy Football PFF Preview. Thank you all for listening. I'm Ian Hartitz, and take care.